The crystal vase exploded against the marble floor, sending glittering fragments across the pristine living room. Hyatt dropped her cleaning cloth, yellow rubber gloves dripping soapy water, as she spun toward the sound. She expected to see 4-year-old Kofi crying, maybe reaching for the pieces. Instead, her blood ran cold. The boy stood frozen for exactly 3 seconds. Then, without a single tear or word, he walked deliberately to the nearest wall. His small body pressed against the cream-colored plaster, face flat, arms rigid at his sides. His breathing became shallow and controlled, like a soldier at attention. Hyatt blinked hard, convinced she was seeing things. "Kofi," she called gently, her voice echoing in the cavernous room. "Sweetheart, are you playing hide and seek?" Silence. She had been working in the Price mansion for exactly 48 hours. The previous maid had been fired for theft, and the employment agency warned her that rich families had their quirks. But this wasn't a quirk. This was something else entirely. Minutes crawled by. 5, 10, 15. Kofi remained motionless, his tiny frame pressed against the wall like he was trying to disappear into it. Hyatt's stomach began to churn. She approached cautiously, her footsteps muffled by the expensive Persian rug. "Kofi, honey, you're scaring me," she whispered, kneeling beside him. "Talk to me. What's wrong?" His lips moved slightly. A sound escaped, barely audible, like air leaking from a balloon. Hyatt leaned closer, her ear inches from his mouth. "Face the wall," he breathed. The words hit her like ice water. Her hands trembled as she reached out, then stopped herself. Something terrible had taught this child to turn away from the world. Something that made a 4-year-old boy choose walls over comfort, silence over safety. In that moment, Hyatt realized she had stumbled into a house where money couldn't buy protection from the monsters that lived within its walls. The heavy oak door slammed shut, echoing through the mansion like a gunshot. Lennox Price strode into his living room, his $1,000 suit wrinkled from another brutal day of corporate warfare. At 38, he commanded boardrooms and controlled millions, but the sight before him stopped him dead in his tracks. His son stood pressed against the wall, like a prisoner awaiting execution. The new maid crouched beside him, her face pale with confusion and fear. Broken glass sparkled on the floor between them, forgotten and dangerous. "What the hell is going on here?" Lennox's voice cracked like a whip across the room. Hyatt scrambled to her feet, still clutching her damp cloth. "Mr. Price, I can explain. He's been like this for over an hour. I think something's wrong. Step away from my son." His words were ice-cold steel. "Now." But as Hyatt reluctantly backed away, Kofi flinched harder against the wall. His tiny shoulders began to shake, and that haunting whisper escaped again. "Face the wall." Lennox felt something crack inside his chest. He built his empire by reading people, by sensing weakness and strength. Yet he had never heard his own son sound so broken, so terrified. The boy wasn't playing. He was hiding. "Kofi," Lennox said, forcing gentleness into his voice as he knelt down. "It's Daddy. Look at me, son." But Kofi's forehead remained pressed against the plaster, his small hands balled into fists at his sides. The whisper came again, fractured and desperate. "Face the wall." Hyatt found her courage. "Sir, with respect, when was the last time you really watched him? Really looked at what happens in this house?" The question landed like a physical blow. Lennox realized with sickening clarity that he could recite quarterly reports from memory, but he couldn't remember the last time he'd spent an uninterrupted hour with his son. His empire had grown while his child had become a stranger, and now that stranger was whispering words that sounded like a prison sentence. Hyatt's voice cut through the tension like a blade through silk. "Kofi, sweetheart, nobody's going to hurt you. You don't have to stay there anymore." The boy's shoulders trembled, but he didn't move. His whisper came again, more broken than before. "Face the wall." Something inside Hyatt snapped. She had seen enough broken children in her 20 years of domestic work to recognize the signs. This wasn't discipline. This was damage. "Kofi," she said firmly, ignoring Lennox's sharp stare. "Turn around and look at me. Right now." Slowly, painfully, the boy's head turned. His eyes were glass marbles filled with terror, tears threatening to spill. His small hand shook as he reached for the hem of his blue t-shirt. "Don't," he started to whisper, then stopped himself. "It's okay," Hyatt encouraged. "Show us." Kofi lifted his shirt just enough to reveal his lower back. Lennox's breath caught in his throat. Faint purple bruises dotted the child's skin, like sick constellation. Some were fresh. Others had faded to yellow-green, meaning this had been happening for weeks, maybe months. "Oh my God!" Lennox breathed, his voice cracking. "What is this? Who did this to you?" For the first time in what felt like hours, words poured from Kofi's lips like water through a broken dam. "She made me face the wall every time I was bad. Every time I broke something or made noise or asked questions. She said if I turned around, it would be worse. She said if I told you, you'd send me away forever." The truth hit Lennox like a freight train. Maria, the previous maid. He had fired her 2 weeks ago for stealing jewelry, never thinking to ask if she had stolen something far more precious, his son's sense of safety. "She laughed when she hurt me," Kofi continued, his voice getting smaller. "She said rich boys needed to learn their place. She said you didn't care about me anyway, only your money." Lennox fell to his knees, his expensive suit forgotten as tears streamed down his face. His empire meant nothing. His wealth was worthless. He had failed the one person who mattered most. That night, the Price Mansion transformed from a tomb of silence into a battlefield for justice. Lennox sat in his study, phone pressed to his ear, his voice steady despite the storm raging in his heart. "I don't care what it costs," he told his lawyer. "I want Maria found. I want her arrested. I want her prosecuted to the full extent of the law." Hyatt stood nearby, arms folded, making sure he didn't lose his nerve. She had seen too many wealthy parents bury scandals to protect their reputations. But Lennox surprised her. He wanted accountability, not cover-ups. Within hours, the wheels of justice began turning. Police reports were filed. Medical examinations were scheduled. Child Services was notified. Lennox used his connections not to hide the truth, but to ensure it was heard loudly and clearly. But Hyatt wasn't finished with him. She cornered him in the hallway, her eyes blazing with purpose. "Legal action isn't enough," she said bluntly. "That boy needs therapy. Professional help. Trauma doesn't disappear because you write checks." Lennox nodded, humbled. "Tell me what to do." The next morning, they drove to the city's most respected child psychology center. Kofi clung to Hyatt's hand in the waiting room, his eyes darting to every wall like they were magnets, pulling him away from safety. Dr. Sarah Chun, a gentle woman with kind eyes, knelt to his level. "Kofi, I heard you've been through something scary. Would you like to talk about it?" The boy shook his head frantically, pressing closer to Hyatt. "That's okay." Dr. Chun smiled. "We don't have to talk today. But I want you to know something important. Walls are for hanging pictures and keeping rain out. They're not for hiding behind. You never have to face a wall again unless you want to." It was a small start, but it was a beginning. For the first time in months, Kofi looked at an adult without fear. The healing wouldn't be quick, but it had finally begun. 3 weeks later, the sound of breaking glass echoed through the mansion once again. Hyatt rushed into the living room, expecting to find Kofi pressed against his familiar wall of terror. Instead, she found him standing in the middle of the room, staring at the broken pieces of a small decorative bowl. His body tensed. His eyes darted toward the wall. Every instinct screamed at him to run, to hide, to whisper those 3 haunting words that had become his prison sentence. But Hyatt moved quickly, positioning herself between Kofi and the wall. "No hiding today, sweetheart. It was just an accident. Accidents happen to everyone." Kofi's lip trembled. "Face the..." he started to whisper. "No," Hyatt said firmly but kindly. "Face me instead. Look at my eyes. See, I'm not angry. Nobody's angry." Footsteps echoed in the hallway. The old terror flickered across Kofi's face as his father appeared in the doorway. But instead of running to the wall, something different happened. Something miraculous. Kofi ran toward his father. Lennox dropped to his knees, catching his son in a fierce embrace. "It's okay, buddy. It was just a bowl. We have a million bowls. We only have one you. I'm sorry, Daddy. Kofi whispered against his father's shoulder. You have nothing to be sorry for, Lennox replied, his voice thick with emotion. I'm the one who's sorry. I'm sorry it took so long for me to protect you. Later that evening, as Hyatt tucked Kofi into bed, he looked up at her with eyes that finally held hope instead of fear. Hyatt, can I ask you something without facing the wall? She smiled, smoothing his hair. You can ask me anything, anytime, facing any direction you want. Do you think Daddy really loves me? I know he does, sweetheart. And more importantly, so do you. As she turned off the lights, Hyatt could see through the window that Maria had been arrested that morning. Justice was finally coming. But more importantly, a little boy had learned that walls were meant to hold up houses, not hold down dreams. The healing would continue, day by day, until the whispers of fear were replaced by the laughter of a child who was finally, truly free.